Welcome back to the Now Morning Show at 6:42 a.m. And our next conversation is speaking to a UK-based researcher who uncovered some letters challenging media. Joining us this morning via Zoom is none other than Dr. Rachel and Charles, researcher, course director and lecturer at the Birmingham City University. Good morning, Dr. Charles, and welcome.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you with us on this show. Thank you for waking up what I assume is just a little bit earlier than us this morning. So cheers to that. Let's get straight into the conversation. I mean, these letters have definitely challenged not just, I think, media perceptions, but of course our perceptions as well as individuals. They were hidden away in tin boxes for decades. Can you tell us about the moment when you first discovered these letters and what it felt like and how it just propelled this event?
Well, first of all, I want to say I was searching in all of the wrong places, firstly, to find them. And so I came to Trinidad and I went to the National Archives. I went to UWI St. Augustine Library. I went to UWI Mona Library and checked the Jamaican archives as well. And I was looking for these letters and I couldn't find it. And I was like, oh my God, how will we find it? And I was speaking with my um, my co-investigator, Dr. Mulia Maye, who's based at UWI St. Augustine. And she mentioned we can just do a call out to the public to find these letters. And something then occurred to me, why don't you check in your local community? Walk around your local community. I'm from Ledno Village, Chagonas, so a big hooray and shout out to people in Ledno Village, Chagonas. I'm from that community, and I said, okay, let's see what's within my community first of all. And so someone who's very close to me brought me that tin. And you can see I've sent you the images, that rustic sort of finish tin that actually appears to me like it came from the UK. And the moment I found them, I was so surprised. I was like, oh my God, these are handwritten letters. They're more than I anticipated. Anticipated postcards with historical landmarks and so forth, but not quite these personal letters, which offer something more valuable. And if you think about, it's based around my community where you're getting stories decades before my birth. It provides a kind of dual perspective that as a Trinbagonian, I appreciate, as a Caribbean person, I appreciate, but also as a researcher, it shows a parallel view. And so we're able to, putting on my research hat, get emerging themes in this cultural bridge between two worlds, that is the Caribbean and the United Kingdom.
Now, there's no doubt that some of these themes, of course, are things that you would have been familiar with, and many will be familiar with, given, of course, our society and what we've seen happen over the decades. However, one of the things that has been mentioned is the fact that this definitely counters what we would know that would have been distributed in media, let's say, in the 1900s. And also, particularly, there is one reference to this country is not a bed of roses. How would you say these personal accounts challenge or differ from the official narratives that we've accepted historically?
I'm not sure about the word accepted. I believe that it has been challenged. I believe that stereotypes have been, it's pervaded mainstream media, particularly in the UK. And so maybe Caribbean migrants, people who reside in the Caribbean, perhaps may have critiqued those sort of stereotypes, but there's no evidence sometimes when we critique. And so what these letters do is that they provide evidence rather to debunk these common misconceptions about Caribbean migrants emigrating. And I think when we think about that quote, this country is not a bed of roses, we can see that there's this idea of, this soft life that appears, that comes to you when you come to the UK. But of course, we're talking about the 64 to 75. So it's like they didn't have this effortless life with substantial financial rewards. In fact, they were doing multiple jobs, according to these letters that I reviewed. Caribbean migrants and Trinbagonian, just to be even more specific to the letters, they had multiple jobs and they maintained a modest standard of living. And many of them found themselves stretched. Even if they wanted to come home, they didn't have that surplus money to visit. And so what we're having is, from these letters, we can see a stark contrast to what was reported in British tabloids, during that set period, and even later on, it's still debatable, it's still arguable. So what we can understand from the letters is that the characterization of Caribbean migrants as a burden on British economy is fundamentally false. And there were hardworking individuals striving to make ends meet through multiple jobs and constant effort. And so that is something that, we must follow through and find more evidence to support. Hence the reason why the letters are really, really important, finding more of them, that is.
Now, for want of a better expression, one of the things these letters can also do is debunk certain theories, one of them being that there wasn't that necessary cultural integration. And we also saw that from the letters as well, there was that mention of perhaps participating, not perhaps rather, but confirmed participation in pigeon shows, also films being produced and so much more. What other surprising contributions were you able to uncover with the discovery of these letters?
Well, first of all, the pigeon thing was a whole surprise to me. So let's just mention that part. I was schooled, so even my own assumptions were challenged, as an individual. But I think in terms of pulling and drawing out and perhaps more fascinating things is, this idea of cultural assimilation or adaptation, where in the letters, you see migrants experiencing what it's like to prepare pheasants for cooking, and it reveals. So it's kind of reminiscent of the Downton Abbey sort of vibe, or it's Downton Abbey-esque if you want to characterize it in some kind of way. But you also had in the letters where the writings would portray this idea of adopting a British fashion and a sense of speech, sounding posh, that desire to sound posh, that desire to look a particular part and to fit in, to assimilate within the particular culture in the UK, wherever they were from locally. And also, it was not one-sided, and I think this is the part that I really applaud. It was not one-directional. The letters describe elaborate dinner parties hosted for dignitaries, where Trinbagonian cuisine was center stage, and so that's demonstrating integration was a two-way process, a cultural sharing, challenging again that prevalent media narrative that portrayed Caribbean migrants as socially isolated or culturally incompatible with British society. And so those are the things we need to kind of bring back to the table and bring to the discussion and sort of again draw on more letters to get evidence this as well.
Now, you mentioned more letters, and one of the things that we know, of course, is this led to a call, as you would have alluded to earlier in the conversation with your colleague at the University of the West Indies. But now the call is much larger. Now, these letters that you were discussing, these came from your community in Trinidad and Tobago. Have you received any other contributions from other islands and migrants?
We do have some letters, but what we're searching from other islands, and some of the letters even that I collected within my community allude to some connections to St. Vincent. What we're looking for is not just the popular voice, the authors, the mainstream voices, for lack of a better description. We're looking for representation of everyday living and everyday life. I want to understand what, my neighbor was doing, when they lived in the UK, how they were writing and describing themselves and getting that first-hand account to bring that authentic voice to the forefront. And so we're doing the same call out within Jamaica and Barbados and hopefully other islands, because we know that Jamaica, in terms of statistics, shows that Jamaica, Barbados, as well as Trinidad and Tobago, we had the most movement to the UK during the 1940s period onward. So obviously, most letters may come from those areas, but we want to also shine light on other islands as well. So the call hopefully would, reach around to all of the islands at some point. That's our hope anyway.
Well, hoping that this will be just the beginning of that. Now, how do you think these letters are going to reshape our understanding of Britain's multicultural identity, and specifically the role that Caribbean migrants have played in shaping modern British society?
I think for me, when I think about mainstream media versus alternative media, there's a shaking sometimes, and we see that a lot with influencers doing stories or the average citizen doing stories. And what this does, these letters, that is, it brings a balance between mainstream and alternative media. When we think about, and I just want to draw on some theory here, just to be clear, we think about the work of Francis Berrigan and Peter Lewis, and these are scholars from, the 70s, where they were talking about community media is media for the people and by the people. And sometimes mainstream media tend to leave, the people out of the story. And so what we're hoping with these letters is to have a written and more sort of balance between the representation of the voices of the people, as well as the treatment that a journalist or a reporter or a documentary maker would want to give to a story of that nature. So that is what we're hoping, number one, but also to restore these archives, to host them in a really important place. We're talking about valuable letters. The letters I didn't even want to touch. I put them in plastic and was protecting them. These letters need to be protected because they're quite important. And I think what we want to drive home is that your story, all of our stories are important too. And so we want to host these letters in really important spaces so that everyone can engage, can interact, can immerse themselves and have experience that first-hand account of the lives of others.
Definitely something that will be, hopefully rather, will be experienced by all and will again contribute to just opening our understanding when it comes to our history. Dr. Rachel Ann Charles, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's been an absolute pleasure. All the best to you and have an excellent day.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Rachel Ann Charles, researcher and course director and lecturer at Birmingham City University, touching with us on some beautiful letters. Stay tuned. This is an Our Morning Show. We'll be right back.